trickle in. But we are live on LinkedIn.
Great.
Thank,
I'd like to
thank.
know where people are coming from or who they are representing.
That would be wonderful if people, as you join, if you could write where you're connecting from in the chat, in the stream chat, that would be wonderful. I will be keeping track of the chat throughout the webinar, so any comments that arise, please do type them in the chat. But naturally, people will take a minute or two to actually join. Anna
All right.
writes, looking forward to hearing some tips on leading with agility. Yes, right back at you. I'm also very excited to learn from you, Tatiana. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Most welcome.
I think we will have people connecting from Greece and the UK predominantly in the chat. Oksana
Great.
writes Greece. Well, since it is top of the hour, it is already 1 or 2 minutes over. Why don't we just get into the conversation, get into the flow of things, and then people will jump in. I will reiterate that they can ask questions anytime throughout the webinar as well. But without further ado, again, thank you so much for joining us today, Tatiana. It's just wonderful to have you. I'm personally really interested to start us off. If you could tell us a little bit about how you ended up in a US business school faculty from growing up in Athens, Greece. Let's start
First,
there.
sure. Manana, thank you so much for inviting me and for Morphosis organizing all of this. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I consider myself an academic immigrant. So I came to the United States to study as a senior after finishing my senior year in high school, Δημόσιο Παλαιού Ψυχικού, for anyone that knows a lot of the areas in Greece. I grew up and was raised in Athens, Greece, and always wanted to see if there was an opportunity to study abroad. And I had that chance with some help from some funding that I had available to me. My first degree was a science degree. It was a pre-med degree. I was very curious about physiology, and I was really curious of how science is connected to the world. And it was not a business degree. I never thought that I would end up where I am teaching now. But as my career progressed, I found myself in learning and development, human resources for the university. I live in a college town in the middle of the United States, about in Bloomington, Indiana, the Midwest. And I ended up staying here. And in my transition to learning and development, I realized how important learning is for people's, I would say, occupational wellness. It's important to be able to learn something new, to apply it, to improve yourself, to look into enhancing your career. And I was completely hooked. The transition to academics happened about 20 years ago, where it's in learning and training, you develop workshops that are anywhere from 30 minutes to 60 minutes to 75, and you can even do 1 day retreats and workshops. But I liked the idea of helping students learn a skill in the span of 8 weeks or 16 weeks. Sort of that transfer of training made a lot of sense. And I got to work with younger students, undergraduate students, first and second year students initially, that allowed me to see that learning progression. Now I teach at the Kelley School of Business, a top ranked business school in all of the United States. I teach MBA students. I'm going to reference several times the negotiation class that I teach, where there's a lot of soft skills learning and training that happens. And I teach undergraduates. We also have a top ranked online MBA program. So the students are different, the audiences are different, but the skill set and the pedagogy that we apply in learning is very, very similar. So thank you for having me. That's a brief intro on me.
That's such a pleasure and absolutely such a wonderful background, especially given the topic of mental agility. I think before we get into the meat of the webinar, so to say, I wanted
Sure.
to ask you first. You said you started with a science pre-med degree, right?
Mm-hmm,
And then you
mm-hmm,
moved into business. I mean, speaking of
mm-hmm.
mental agility, that's quite
Yeah,
a jump.
yeah,
So I wanted to ask you, I think the thing that I would be most interested, because I myself have also studied, well, science.
mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know, what was well, at least one top lesson or top skill lesson, or perhaps a mode of operation that you have carried over from
Hmm.
this pre-med and science degree that has helped you in your current field and occupation as well?
I think overall, an overarching theme is curiosity. If you are curious, regardless of being a little kid asking 1,000 questions, I'm still an adult that asks too many questions, my friends say, but I'm always curious and eager to learn, to try to understand. I'm interested in many different things and how they all connect and build together. So I have kind of kept that spirit of curiosity and always to continue to learn. And in the world that we live today, I mean, that is completely the theme that we have. And what pushes us to be agile is that eagerness to be a student and to continue to learn new things. So I would say curiosity for me is what has been the motivational factor.
That a splendid answer, truly, just wonderful. And at the same time, I mean, curiosity now is well, satisfiable, so to say, with with all information available directly at our fingertips, with search engines, as especially with the development of AI. You kind of just
Hmm.
anything you're curious about, you jump on there, you ask ChatGPT, it spits out the
Sure,
answer.
sure,
Yeah,
sure.
well, I mean, on that topic, actually, I think it's a double-edged sword in many ways. So I wanted to ask you, what are some tasks or roles that you see AI has already replaced, and
Sure.
how has this shifted the skill demand in the workforce as you've seen?
Well, first of all, I'll say I was looking at a LinkedIn research study that talked about, or maybe I posted it for my students, that said, if you cannot answer the question of what problem solving has AI helped you deliver in a project or in a position, if they cannot answer that question in an interview, they're not going to come across as being up with the times. If they say AI is only for me organizing, my friend group and what restaurant we'll eat in, they need to be skilled enough to show how they can use it in their everyday work. Let me take a few steps back and say, I was in the workforce when the World Wide Web entered, and I kind of see the same thing happening again. We all thought that we'd be paralyzed by sort of the internet doing everything for us and finding things there and finding questions, and we wouldn't be doing anything. And that's not true. I mean, how many times during the day do you reference something or do you look up something that you're interested in? Because everything is on the web. The same thing is happening with AI. It's technology that's helping us be more efficient or loosening or giving us more time to do other things that are necessary or need more of our mental strength. So when you say what tasks, I use AI quite often to summarize something that is lengthy that I want to read, maybe a research paper. I'll say, give me the abstract if I can't get access to that. I just did it the other day. I had a lot of student comments and I asked it to categorize them, prioritize them, or summarize them. I can't, I will take time or have my Copilot, literally, I use Copilot to help me do that. But then I need to spend more time critically thinking or synthesizing information. AI cannot do that at the point where I would prefer it and I would think that the work is authentically mine and I'm using my work or my mental strength to do that. AI can help you get started with brainstorming. It can help you be creative. It can help sort of, I think of it as at a starting line of a race, say a 5 or a 10K, you need sort of that inertia to get started. But once you get into the groove, you can continue going. AI can help you in that very first part where you build inertia, where you sort of get into the groove of getting your creative juices going or brainstorming or organizing, and then you can get into a groove. I don't consider it being something you can completely assign it the entire project of what you do. In some cases, you do with really good prompting, but you need a lot of back and forth in order to get what high quality results from it.
So how would you say that you think creative problem solving could coexist with AI? Do you think it's only at the beginning?
I was discussing this yesterday with my MBA students in a negotiation class. I had assigned them an exercise and they were role playing and they were negotiating. And one of them was using AI to help it think of ideas that they were not thinking about. So I think in creative, you can say, I'm solving this problem. Here's the situation. Here are the parameters. Here's what I'm thinking. What am I missing? So in order to do that, you're going to spend a lot of time entering all this information and helping it help you. I think you can get more ideas. So in this case, yesterday, my students were saying it hadn't thought of us splitting the shares, or there was a negotiation about several tangibles on prices and time and so on. But there were several things that my students had not discussed, and AI helped them think about that. But I don't think that you can initially say, here's the problem, here's the case, what should I do? It will give you kind of a mediocre answer. Yeah, you can get by, but I would not go into a full-blown negotiation where my company's reputation is depending on it and just depend on AI to give me the solution. That would be really risky to do, because we need our critical ability to think in order to make the quality better. Louise saying, I absolutely agree. It took me months to train my AI to provide me with decent content. I completely agree. So, Louise, I also think, remember, the inertia at the starting line is what we wanted to help us with too.
First of all, wonderful point, Louise. Thank you for jumping in with the comments. Anyone in the audience, if you have any comments or questions that arise during the webinar, please do write them in the chat. We will make sure to monitor the chat throughout our conversation as well. Now, on this note, I mean, you've touched on some wonderful soft skills that are absolutely vital for today's day and age. But again, to touch on your experience specifically,
Yeah.
which soft skills do you think professionals tend to underestimate,
Mm.
and why? What makes them critical in the era of AI?
In my opinion, I think emotional intelligence, which is your ability to identify, be aware of your state of emotion, uh, manage your own emotions, temper them, communicate with someone else, understand where their emotional state is so that you can adapt in the moment. Being able to do that is something that is a skill that needs to be coached, it needs to be learned, it needs to be trained. You need to lather, rinse, repeat, and go back and practice. Quite often, we do a lot of emotional intelligence training, especially for higher level leadership positions that have really incredible competence, but it's maybe warmth and communication skills that they need to work on in order to be better leaders. So those are soft skills. I wouldn't say are ignored, but maybe they're not invested in as much in learning and growing and training in this particular. It's easier to learn how to do an Excel spreadsheet or to work on a database or to work on coding because it's more tactile, but something like emotional intelligence that grabs many of these skills together is, I wouldn't say ignored, but it's sort of easier to bypass, especially if someone is told that they need to work on it.
I could not agree with you more on all accounts. Truly, I mean, emotional intelligence is largely underestimated at the very least, right? But and you're absolutely right that the technical skills that are more visible and more actionable, so to speak, they're at the same time more appreciated or more frequently assessed.
Yeah.
But on that
Yeah.
note, I would like to ask, how do you see emotional intelligence manifest?
With you interacting with AI or people interacting to.
People interacting with each, I mean, truly, both are very, I'd be interested in
Mm,
hearing your answer in relation to both,
mm.
but definitely in the workforce on a person level, how
Uh,
do you envision it manifest, and how would you
I
assess it
think
also?
it's the absolute secret sauce in leadership. And people need to be able to monitor emotions, identify them, be aware of them, manage their own, be self-aware. There's a lot of reflection and self-awareness that has to happen with emotional intelligence. Unless you go into AI and you say, I am a leader that does this, 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 and this, what do I need to work on? You're going to get quite, I would say, canned responses. You can't, I mean, unless our AI tools can improve and be a lot more emotionally intelligent themselves, so we can train them to do that, to know situations. I don't see how. Maybe AI can help you come up with situations and drills that you can do in order to work on improving. Uh, Maybe it can give you better feedback on if you're being a good listener or if you are uh, being empathetic in your responses by listening in on meetings like the one we have today. You can bring an AI tool to give you feedback. But I do think it has to start from individuals, from people that want to improve in these skills. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question,
No, you absolutely
Manana.
are. And to follow that flow of conversation, actually, Anna asked a great question in the chat. She asked, "Do you have any
How,
tips on how to recognize our emotions? Are there questions we can ask ourselves to help with
mm,
this?"
I quite often work with a leadership coach myself because I like to take time to work on that myself. It's self discovery and it's self work we all need to do at times. Recognizing emotion, there's one big important step in self-awareness is reflection. So you can act in a situation and then take a step back and say, how did this go? How did I feel? How could I have done differently? What could I have done differently? What are the results going to be? So think of it as sort of a set of activities and exercises and questions you ask yourself as you step back after an event has happened. You can also prepare yourself for something, understanding and knowing the context of what some of your regular habits are or what things that you're trying to change. Because in improving ourselves, we want to be able to change some of the ways that we act. Well, we have to practice doing some of that. And for me, having a coach by your side that you can work with and say, hey, this happened. How do I approach this differently? In the business world, we need that. A lot of people have and work with leadership coaches, and I think it's essential. I recommend it a lot, so I decided to work with one myself. So it has brought me great improvement, I think.
Such a splendid answer, truly. To follow that also in my experience too, because my background is in psychology, so I can bring that perspective a little more. Something that
For
has helped
sure.
me greatly is evaluating all of my thoughts in terms of reflections versus reactions, because
Hmm.
every event that occurs in our life, it causes a certain reaction which comes
For
from an
sure.
external source.
For
But then
sure.
if you reflect on this reaction that you're having, you can understand whether how you want to express it, whether the cause is actually what you attributed to initially, and then adjust your, well,
Yeah.
manifestation of this emotion accordingly.
But
Now,
depending, I
go ahead,
want to say, I want to interject here for a minute. It
please.
depends, depending on your personality. I'm much more extroverted. I need to talk this through with somebody. If I stay in my head, I don't think I'll be challenged enough, or I may not be creative to think of something differently. This is where AI may come in and help you think something differently. I prefer to interact with someone that I trust and that I know knows me. For others, it may be better for them to do more self-reflection that's quiet, that's journaling, that's not that I don't like to journal and think it's important, but I think you need to have that self-awareness of knowing yourself and what works best for you.
Definitely. How do you envision the future of work leaders to who fail to develop these essential skills like emotional intelligence?
I think they may not be able to be as effective. So I wouldn't say fail to develop, or maybe don't recognize it, don't take the time to invest in it. Eventually, I'm not sure if they will be as satisfied, or they can look back and say, "What have I accomplished? How fulfilled am I? What's the purpose of what it is that I'm doing?" or they may be frustrated, or they may not be able to see some of the things that other people see. Quite often, getting feedback from others around you, people that fail to improve are people that don't ask for feedback from people around them of how they come across, how do they show up. If they want to change how they show up, I think they can improve. But if they don't care to do that, I mean, they can proceed the way whatever works for them. I'm not judging because maybe there's reasons. I would start to try to understand why is it that they act this way, what's in their background, and trying to be empathetic about possibly what could be creating their lack of wanting to develop. Or maybe in their eyes, they're fine.
Definitely. I mean, it's for sure a question that leaders will have to assess themselves too. But there is definitely, I mean, all kinds of lack of skills, especially when it comes to emotional intelligence, manifests in some way in the form of either productivity or employee relations, for
Yeah.
certain.
At some
Um,
point, yeah, I come across, I mean, to give you an example, I get involved quite often when a board says that this senior VP needs to be a better speaker. We can't put them in front of the board investors unless they can. I do a lot of coaching of speakers and communication, so there is a motivation there. This is not emotional intelligence, it's just a skill of public speaking. But when your CEO says to you, you will get to be in the C-suite if you fix this and this, where you're going to hurry up and try to make that change and try to make that happen. So wherever the feedback comes from, I think it's helpful. And if there's urgency to it, leaders will step up and make those changes. But if there's no urgency and no one is giving them feedback, they're not going to. So um, it's too bad, but maybe there's a reason, as I said.
yeah, but it is a wonderful point, though. I mean, it's external feedback that shows you the sides that you might not be seeing or might not be ready to see as
For
well. So,
sure.
to all the leaders out there, definitely ask all of your team members and colleagues for feedback at whatever opportunity you get. Most likely anonymous, most likely preferred, because people might not want to be
Sure.
identified and linked. But anyways, Lewis asked in the chat, what do you think of the Big Five test? Is it relevant to learn about our emotions and learn how to deal with them in professional and private environments?
Luis, I'm not familiar with the Big Five test. Maybe you can share with me what that is, but I cannot agree more. Yes, a big, big yes. We need to learn how we show up, how we're perceived. And when we learn how we are perceived, we're definitely going to change our ways. Let me give you a very simple example from a while ago. When I worked in human resources, when I did training seminars, I always wore a suit and um, presented in front of a group. And our kids at the time were in a daycare where if you showed up at 5:31 in the evening, you were charged $1 per minute that you were late to pick them up. So
Wow.
at 5:30, and of course there's the garage parking, the training ends at 5. I'm pulling things together, trying to get to the daycare. And I would rush in, I would greet the teachers. And this was kind of sort of remember now, I'm wearing a suit, I'm rushing in, it's 5:30, I greet the teachers. So the assistant teachers, some of the helpers in the rooms where the kids they were, 1 and 3 at the time, um, were ones that I hired as a babysitter. So one of the babysitters, the first night we come back, we were out to dinner, and she says to me, "This is wonderful. I love your family. I like the kids so much, and you are so." How did she say it? I'm trying to think. You are so approachable after all. After all. I said, after all, or maybe it was approachable or friendly. I don't know what she said, but she used the word after all. And I paused and I said, after all, tell me more about that. She said, well, some of us think that, you're always kind of rushing when you come in. You're always um, coming across as sort of a power move as you walk in and coming back from the business world. So she started describing me as I was there picking up the kids at the end of a workday, and I honestly realized how I was showing up to this group. And I'm telling you this because that's the feedback that I received, that I was very grateful that I received that, because these are people that are caring for my children. If they perceive me as a big snob that's not going to talk to them, that only talks to the main teacher, they're not going to give attention to my kids the rest of the day. So I purposefully would slow down before entering. I would make sure to greet everyone by their names. I changed my behavior because that piece of feedback was critically important to me. And if she had not said, after all, I would not have known or perceived that. I was kind of going about my way and wanting to get my stuff done, as I say. Anyway, okay, Luis is describing the Big Five test, the Ocean personality test: openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, extroversion, and neuroticism. I love that. So I appreciate that. I'll take a look at it too. So
I
yeah.
can quickly address what Lewis, to get us back on track to what Lewis said. The ocean, the big five, hexaco, choose whichever one of these test options you have. They're wonderful tools for understanding yourself on an individual level. They're not very reliable for assessing necessarily, for hiring purposes or anything like that. For the purpose of self-reflection, definitely do feel free to use those tools. The tests, some of them are available online. So it's a wonderful tool for self-reflection. Now, to get us back on track, since we were talking about the development and the essential nature of soft skills, how do you envision, or what do you envision the role of HR and learning and development teams being in embedding these soft skill and learning these soft skills into organizational DNA?
Yeah. Um, it has to be strategic. There's no doubt. No director of learning and development can create change or have impact without being side by side with everyone in the C-suite. This has got to be a decision that comes from the top. So if there is commitment from the top for improving certain skills, you're going to see that be effective in the organization. It can't be bottom up. It has got to be top down. I'll give you an example. I work with several organizations that have cohorts that work for 6 months in developing certain skills. There's an action learning project where the teams have to take a problem from the company and to solve the problem or propose solutions and all present in front of the C-suite, because the C-suite is trying to see who are the high potentials, how do they show up, how are they working together, and definitely how do they present. That's where I get involved, and how are they speaking in front of a group. But this may also happen from a improvement of, they want everyone to learn certain skills as they relate to a work process or Six Sigma training or any of this. And I'm not just saying for soft skills, any skills. There has to be a strategic involvement and a strategic commitment from the top, financial and time related wise. So L&D gets involved in assessing what the needs are, I would say at first, doing some benchmarking, who in the industry does this well and what does it look like. There's several organizations. I belong to the talent development organization and have for many years, an international organization that talks about learning and development and ways to bring it to the workforce. Designing learning anywhere, in hybrid, in online, in person, and maybe a combination of all three. All of the work that I do with different companies all involves all three. So we may have a kickoff in person, virtual sessions that continue, and a compilation at the end of their 6 months journey that they do together. I'm thinking of other things that continuing to assess, that the HR learning and development needs to see how programs are being effective, tweak them, assess them, come back. And I'm talking not just programs that are learning and building soft skills, but are they doing 360 reviews of managers and leaders? Are they doing and teaching performance evaluation? What does that process look like? And then constantly improving and refining, and by doing focus groups and interviews. So it's an ongoing process that I think there's no button that you press that says, we will do soft skills development. It depends on what your needs are for your industry and for your workforce.
On that note, I would like to dive a little deeper in terms
Hmm.
of organizational readiness, right? Because we have all these different components. We have the HR, we have the C-suite, we have the learning and development, but there's also the individuals, right? The colleagues, the employees that would benefit from these. So, I mean, to phrase it as a proper question, how do you think organizations can assess their cultural readiness the, for in embracing both soft skills and AI training?
Yeah. Um, Again, I would do, I'm looking at my notes because I just saw Dave Burse, who is I would say an expert on AI training. He has an incredible class on LinkedIn Learning about prompting. And I was with him. He's going to be on a live of mine next week. 96% of C-suite leaders expect AI to boost productivity, and 77% of workers have said that it has added to their workload. So we have a disconnect from leadership saying we need to incorporate this into our workforce, but the workforce is saying we're exhausted and it's adding to what we have to do. So at some point we have to, and I'm just talking about using AI tools, we have to take a step back and assess where is our learning and where are our needs? What do we know now? Where do we need to go? And how do we bridge that gap and how do we get there? So that's the type of assessment that I'm talking about. Assessment from a say time effectiveness. How do we run meetings? Do a audit of how long do we spend in meetings every week. I think that is one of the biggest time suckers in organizations. You're paying everyone so much per hour or per month or per year, and you waste time by being inefficient in how you use space and time in meetings. That's one place that you can begin by trying to be organized in certain structures and ways that you use. So it depends on what it is that you're going to improve, but I think first you measure and then you assess and then you implement.
Definitely. I think you touched upon on an interesting theme, which is the barriers that are associated with the training, right? Because one is resistance or perhaps like a clash in views and perspectives. I'd be interested to know a little bit more about what you view as barriers to acquiring new skills like soft skills.
Hmm. You know, I do a lot of in-person training, online training, and I'm always empathetic to the fact of you never know what people's backgrounds are, especially with public speaking. Maybe they went to a training where they were ridiculed, they were asked to get up and speak and do a funny, some kind of improv thing that was traumatic to them, and so they don't want to be part of this. You never know what the background is. You also don't know what their perception is of learning. They may not think that this is going to improve them or this is a waste of their time. So really quickly, initially, you have to win people over because the barrier is, what are you going to teach me that I don't know? You know, I'm Greek. We tend to do that a lot. Like, who are you to tell me? And what are you going to teach me that I don't already know? So, in a way, if you know that that's the perception and that could be a barrier, you need to overcome it by not saying, let me teach you, but to say, here's people that are successful like you. Here's benchmarks that you can reach, or speak to people in their language to overcome some of that barrier. Look, people have to want to improve, and if they don't want to, I can't sprinkle magical pixie dust over them and make them change. Some of the barriers may be accessibility, and now with virtual opportunities we have opportunity for them to learn and grow. Maybe it's that they want to do it privately, so you can do a lot of asynchronous work together with synchronous. But I do think people need to be held accountable, and make it something that's interesting, that's fun, that they can see the change in the soft skills that they make. And that's why you can't just do a training and go back and meet again. There have to be things in between where they have to check in, where they have to report back, where they have to continue to build those skills. And those are the steps how you scaffold it too. You're probably aware of Bloom's taxonomy of how you build learning to happen from sort of the very basic level up to the more advanced level. If the learning is designed in a way that can grow with the learner, I do think that it can be more enjoyable. But The barriers are time, the barriers are interest and motivation. Some of that we can monitor, some of that we can't control.
Definitely. I think, well, of course, Bloom's taxonomy was a wonderful, wonderful parallel. So, and the motivation plays into it, and a large part too. Motivation and something that you mentioned a little earlier in the webinar, which was curiosity.
Hmm.
And curiosity, I mean, I want to dive right into mental agility, because that's
Sure.
where all of these kind of collide together. We have motivation, curiosity, and there's this is a desire for learning and facing the unknown. But before I get into the nitty gritty, I want to, for the sake of everyone in the audience, let's understand what mental agility is. How would you
Mm.
define mental agility generally, and then in the context of leadership more specifically?
So there's many definitions. I really think initially being able to stay focused in a sense of in the middle of a storm is when it's happening. So mentally agile in an urgency kind of crisis situation. So being able to stay focused, be clear, be transparent. You asked me in the previous questions, I was trying to think of role models of people that are mentally agile. I was thinking through the pandemic. In the United States, we had a representative of the government by the name of Anthony Fauci. I thought he was stellar in the way that he uh, withstood the ambiguity that we were in, but was very transparent in the way he communicated and continued to stay the path and be a calm sort of sense of calmness for everyone as we were trying to navigate all of these unknowns. So being able to be transparent and communicate and stay focused when things are going array is one description of mental agility. The other one, which is the more sustainable, would be continuously learning, continuously improving, continuously finding tools that can help you do work that will make your time and will make your effort uh, it will be a better investment of your time. So it's easy to kind of stick and do the things that you know how to do well. But the question is going back to how much, how much meetings, what do meetings cost you when you're bringing everyone on your team per hour is looking at, are you spending the best time of your work and mental ability in the right types of work. So mentally being mentally agile, being able to maximize that balance of quality and quantity of work that you do. So I personally, my motto when I do workshops, I talk about being mentally agile is about being curious, which starts with asking questions and wanting to learn and wanting to grow and wanting to maybe leave things that are working well the way they are and wanting to improve them. Uh, Being courageous is the second one because when you're curious, you're going to ask difficult questions or try to learn things that maybe you're not good at. And after being courageous, you're also probably not going to do well in everything. You're not going to be able to grow as much as you want, or you will have to face yourself or your weaknesses and being resilient and being able to bounce back and lather, rinse, repeat, and doing all over again. So, curiosity is critical. Courage is really, really important. Obviously, as we grow, and then resiliency is for me one of the top level abilities to have as leaders too, especially in how fast moving things are today.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely. There's so many themes that I want to touch on that you covered right now, but I
Sorry.
do want to. I jumped the gun a little bit, and I put this question up because I'm very curious about your opinion on this. I
Mm,
think a lot of people feel overwhelmed with,
mhm.
especially given the pace of things and how AI has accelerated the pace of things and
Yeah.
accelerated the pace of work and the amount of content that people can absorb in a very short amount of time. So I think on that note, time is definitely even more valuable, and allocating it appropriately is even more valuable. And a lot of professionals feel overwhelmed So they might not even find within themselves the time or the ability or the energy to invest in upskilling and reskilling efforts. So on that note, how would you recommend professionals balance their existing responsibilities with such efforts?
If you've ever seen the Lucille Ball episode, I Love Lucy, the show, she's working in a chocolate factory and they have to wrap the little chocolates that are coming through a conveyor belt. Then the conveyor belt starts moving faster and they can't do it fast enough. So she's eating them, she's hiding them. So much of what's happening is reminding me of this, that we are on survival mode. And that is not a healthy place to be. Easy to burn out, easy to just make mistakes and harm your credibility. So you need to be more strategic, just like we were talking earlier about leaders. Everything is urgent and important in your everyday life, but there's certain things that are not urgent, but are very important for your long-term growth and development. And if you're not spending a considerable amount of time, if you're not blocking or stacking your week and your day to spend time there, you are not going to be able to grow and you will be stuck at some point. You'll wake up one day and say, what am I doing here? And I'm burned out and I don't want to do this anymore. So I highly recommend you look at the activities. Again, do an audit of your calendar for a week. And where are you spending time on things that are urgent and important, which is probably going to be most of your day, but where are you spending time? What are the things that are important but are not urgent, but are critical to your growth and development? You need to have a good balance of that. I would see a 30-70 when things are really crazy, but a 60-40 on a good day. And block your time, take time off to reflect, to write, and you will have crazy days. There's no doubt. We all have them, but you need to find a balance in order to do that. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we will, you will be consumed by the craziness, the fast running chocolate candy belt.
It's such a truly that's exactly what I imagine when I think about the rapid development and the rapid changes,
Yeah,
consistent
look that up.
changes.
It's a really funny little short video, but it's
Truly worth it.
yeah, yeah.
It balances the irony and the funniness of it, as well as the
Yeah,
truly like how representative it is of how we feel about this current
for
situation.
sure.
Definitely do look it up. To stay on track with things, I do want to ask you mentioned a couple ways in which individuals can keep themselves accountable and individuals can assess what's valuable to them, and how they allocate their time. But on
Mhm.
an organization level, how do you think an organization can ensure that their workforce remains competitive in the age of AI, given the skills that you just mentioned and given how important they are?
You know, I would say bring it into the conversation. If you want to be a learning workforce and a working place, you need to allot time that's available for people to learn, to grow. Maybe they do it on their own, but maybe you bring them back in a lunchtime, buy food, make it easy for them. Bring them in and say, we're discussing this LinkedIn learning course that we take, or this course, or this book, or this abstract, or this study that we see, and how does it apply to us? It has to be, you can't leave it too free flowing. You have to have it quite organized in order to be able to do that. But I would start with anything that a group has a commitment to, if they want to improve the way they communicate. Quite often, for example, I get involved where groups don't have the conversation of how they best communicate with one another, and they continue to communicate in ways that either works for one person or not the other. But having that conversation is so important. And then they come out of that meeting, which has to be facilitated, by the way, promising or saying, okay, no emails go out after 10 p.m. or because now we have the ability on our email to, delay the extension, when it goes out, or we can say, Slack shuts down at this point, or Manana, how do you prefer for me to communicate with you? Instead of asking you 10 questions a day, that can we meet for 30 minutes at the end of the day? I'm giving you an example of how organizations commit to being more effective as they grow and learn together. And it may not be a way of managing communication channels and having conversations around that. Could be one way of improving and allowing people not to be in the chocolate line of constantly being bombarded. Or maybe there's no Friday meetings, or maybe there's a commitment to take half a day every 2 weeks to do a creative thing that works and fulfills you. Or maybe there's no calling after a certain time, or shutting down certain channels that tend to be really, really busy. So you have to have conversations like this. Otherwise, you're constantly having a lot of friction. And to me, it's not healthy. Mentally, it's not healthy.
I agree. I was actually taking down some of these notes for myself as well to keep them to keep them because I definitely agree. All of the tips that you just gave, absolutely essential. I do want to directly ask though, because I haven't asked this question so directly before. What are three immediate actions that
Yeah.
professionals can take to enhance? Let's start with mental agility, since that's one of the most essential skills in the rapid development and in face of such rapid changes in both the workplace and
Yeah.
in private life as well.
Slow everything down for yourself because everything is spinning around you. Find a place, a space, maybe cover your ears and I use music quite often for many different ways or reasons to operate. Number one is mindfulness and we talked about reflection, journaling, or taking time away just to center yourself. So that mindfulness piece is critical. We talked about the second one is learning new skills, is continuing to flex that learning muscle. Maybe you learn to I've been learning pickleball or paddle in Greece, as we call it, completely new skill. And there's so many different details that you have to retain, but you kind of step away from something you're good at and go to something you're not very good at to see if you can flex that muscle. So learning something new is critical. And finally, I would say is uh, expose yourself to new perspectives. So, meaning try a food from a different place, listen to music from a different place, meet people that are different than you are, because that's what's going to keep you curious and interested in learning. I teach a class of 650 students in international business. I have them in 3 different sections, but this is their second year students. Maybe they haven't traveled as much. Many of them are from different parts of the world, but they're all in the same room. It's my responsibility to tell them that there's something else out there that's different than what we have here. So I play music. I have a playlist on Spotify that I make it available to them, and they add songs to them. And I'll say, "What's the language? Listen to the words." And I make it a trivia, or to get them to participate, I throw out candy, and I always get candy from different parts of the world. The Japanese candy is really popular, but again, exposing them to something different. So mindfulness, learning something different, a new skill, flexing that muscle, and being exposed to something different, and reminding yourself that different is not deficient. All are 3 ways, in my opinion, that can enhance our mental agility.
Splendid answer. Again, I made a note of these for myself naturally. But fun fact, also the things that you just mentioned also serve as protective factors against various psychological problems, including
For sure.
dementia and any type of mental issue as well.
Sure, sure.
But as we're approaching the last minutes of the webinar, I do want to ask the final question, which is, what would you say to someone who still continues to doubt the value of soft skills in today's world and the value of mental agility as well?
Yeah. Um, I would ask questions versus to say something. I would try to understand what they value or where they're coming from, or tell me more about this. So if they said, I disagree, I don't think soft skills are important at all, I wouldn't make a statement. I'd ask a question. Tell me more about that. What experiences have you had with soft skills? And then they would say more. And then I'd ask another question and I say, tell me what motivates that, or where are you coming from? I'm trying to understand. I would just try to figure out why they think what they think, acknowledge it, respect it, not trying to change their opinion. And I would ask them if they're happy and satisfied with where they are. So I would go back to something I'm familiar with. I would say, do you feel comfortable getting up in front of a group and motivating or inspiring a group? How do you feel about those skills? I'm not asking to tell them to improve. I'm trying to figure out how they assess themselves in those. Or listening is important. Do you agree? Hopefully they say yes. Or if they say no, I'd say, when has listening been impactful in some of your day-to-day work? So I wouldn't say something definitive to them. I would open the conversation to try to better understand, because we're not going to win everyone over. If they don't want to learn, or if they don't want to grow, it's okay. That's a perspective as well. That's the way that I see it.
I 100% agree with you. I would like to follow up, though, something that I have heard from leaders quite frequently, those that might not spend as much time assessing or spend as much time understanding what soft skills are. Something that I hear quite frequently is they're the intangibles, right? They're harder. Technical skills is things that you
Ah.
would be able to see in terms of either experience or maybe perhaps a portfolio or achievements, etc. Or you have a coding task and they just tell you go ahead and do it, and that's
Mhm.
a simple assessment. But when it
Mhm.
comes to soft skills, in your view, naturally, how would you observe and what would you look for to notice first of all, mental agility in people, and then the second big one which you mentioned was emotional intelligence? How would you go about noticing these two big ones?
I would refer them back to research that shows that leaders, at first glance, are always judged on warmth more than they are on their competence. And I mean all of the skills that we're describing, that are interpersonal skills, the way that they relate. And the course that I teach with my students, my MBA students, we identify, or we break down, apology responses of CEOs when they go on camera. And right there, when the going is
Wow.
tough, do you believe this person? Do they care? Do they have empathy? At the heart of emotional intelligence is empathy. Can they communicate that? And I can tell you that it will matter to those leaders that if their stock drops, or if their company crashes because of a major faux pas and they went in front of the media and seemed inauthentic, or too harsh, or not understanding enough, or not empathetic enough, then that's going to matter. So I would turn around and say, listen, competence and hard skills are very essential. But as you move up the leadership ladder, people judge you on likability and trustworthiness. And you're not going to put that on a spreadsheet. That's a people skill, and you have got to work on that. Otherwise, again, back to some of my executives that I come in to help them be better communicators. If the board says you're not going to get in front of them once again unless you fix this, they will be motivated. So you've got to find out what's their currency, what's their motivation, and that's going to be the way that you enter in being able to influence them.
Such a wonderful answer. Honestly, first of all, if you have the resources of these leaders if you can point me to the direction and where I could find these videos, I would absolutely love to
Oh,
dissect the videos myself as well. But
it's a it's a it's a good compilation. There's a Harvard Business Review article I can share with you on that likability
please.
and power, and how we can gauge one and the other at times. But the research is there that as leaders progress in an organization, they're judged more on their likability and warmth than they are their competence.
Yeah, I mean, in my own experience, I've felt the same where y- the leaders might not even be the best at the task at hand or at the task that I or my colleagues have been given, but depending on how they direct the situation and how they converse with the person that is more competent in the field, they will gain the knowledge, or the person will be more willing to communicate and explain everything in
Yeah.
detail, so they might not even need the technical skills. But
Yeah.
thank you so much. I would deeply appreciate the resource. I'd love to
Sure.
read it myself, and take all the leaders in the audience do take note to develop these essential soft skills, because that's evidently what you will be assessed on, and what your colleagues and your employees will
For sure.
appreciate more in you as well. Well,
For
as
sure.
we're approaching the end of the webinar, we're at the 55-minute mark at this point. Anyone in the audience, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, any kind of clarification that you might want, please do write it in the chat. But we can wrap up. Tatiana, is there anything you would like to add before we wrap up, and while we wait for questions as
Yeah.
well?
Um, I would say you're based in Greece, and I want to finish with one of our philosophers, Aristotle, talked about, more than 300 years ago, about the pillars of influence. In order to influence and inspire, you need ethos, which is credibility, how you come across, your brand, back to how you're judged. You need logos. You have to have logic and approach of how you come about and how you communicate, which could be considered, this is kind of where the technical skills come in. But the last piece is pathos, where if you can communicate, that's where that emotional intelligence, communicating with emotion, tempering your emotion, adjusting it based on where you are, that gives you the complete trifecta of skills that you absolutely need in order to lead a group, in order to inspire people, in order to make change happen and do good in the world. So that's what I want to close with, because a lot of what we've been talking about is the compilation of that starts from the our ancestors, Uncle Aristotle, as I call him, since I'm Greek as well. So I wanted to leave everyone with that. Uh,
What a wonderful full circle moment.
yeah,
Truly, just a wonderful final note to finish on. It also seems like there are no new questions popping up in the chat, so perhaps we can now move into closing. Thank you so much for joining us, Tatiana. This has been an absolutely pleasurable and greatly insightful session. I have so many notes that I need to go through, and also the resources that you will share with me. I really appreciate it, and thank you so
sure.
much for joining
My
us.
pleasure. My pleasure. Take care.
And
Bye, everyone.
thank you everyone in the audience for attending. Have a wonderful week, everyone.